The notion that the science on climate change is a lie to manipulate Christians is a claim that has been circulating among certain groups, particularly those with conservative or evangelical backgrounds. This idea suggests that the overwhelming scientific consensus on climate change is somehow fabricated or exaggerated, and that its primary purpose is to deceive and control Christians. However, a closer examination of the evidence and the underlying motivations behind this claim reveals a more complex and nuanced reality. Firstly, it is essential to acknowledge that the scientific consensus on climate change is clear and overwhelming. Numerous studies, research papers, and reports from reputable organizations such as the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change (IPCC), the National Aeronautics and Space Administration (NASA), and the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration all confirm that human activities, particularly the emission of greenhouse gases, are significantly contributing to the warming of the planet. The evidence is based on decades of data collection, observation, and analysis, and it is supported by multiple lines of evidence, including temperature records, melting glaciers, sea level rise, and shifts in the distribution of plants and animals. In contrast, the claim that climate change is a hoax or a manipulation tactic lacks credible evidence and relies heavily on misinformation, cherry-picking of data, and unverifiable sources. Many of the arguments presented by climate change skeptics have been thoroughly debunked by the scientific community, and they often ignore or dismiss the overwhelming evidence that supports the reality of human-caused climate change. It is also crucial to recognize that the idea of climate change as a manipulation tactic to control Christians is often rooted in a broader narrative of paranoia and mistrust of science and authority. This narrative is frequently perpetuated by certain media outlets, politicians, and religious leaders who seek to undermine the credibility of climate science and create a sense of confusion and division among their followers. By framing climate change as a conspiracy or a hoax, these individuals can create a sense of us vs. them, where Christians are seen as being under attack by a supposedly secular or liberal elite. However, this narrative ignores the fact that many Christians, including evangelical leaders and theologians, are actively engaged in climate activism and recognize the moral and biblical imperative to care for God's creation. In fact, the Bible contains numerous passages that emphasize the importance of stewardship, sustainability, and compassion for the poor and vulnerable, all of which are relevant to the issue of climate change. By acknowledging the reality of climate change and working to address its causes and consequences, Christians can demonstrate their commitment to these values and uphold their faith's teachings on caring for the planet and its inhabitants. Furthermore, the claim that climate change is a manipulation tactic to control Christians also overlooks the fact that the impacts of climate change are already being felt by communities around the world, including many Christian communities. Rising sea levels, more frequent natural disasters, and changes in temperature and precipitation patterns are affecting the livelihoods, health, and well-being of millions of people, particularly the poor and vulnerable. By denying or downplaying the reality of climate change, Christians may inadvertently be contributing to the suffering and marginalization of their brothers and sisters in Christ. In conclusion, the idea that the science on climate change is a lie to manipulate Christians is a baseless and misleading claim that lacks credible evidence and ignores the overwhelming scientific consensus on the issue. Instead of perpetuating conspiracy theories and mistrust of science, Christians should engage with the evidence, recognize the moral and biblical imperative to care for God's creation, and work to address the causes and consequences of climate change. By doing so, they can demonstrate their commitment to their faith's teachings on stewardship, compassion, and justice, and contribute to a more sustainable and equitable future for all.